looked, as a kind of 11, you're looking at it and you're like, over the last few years, you're like, what Man United players? You know, as we sit there today, you could have a case for a few of them to get in, a right few. So I think if they can get top 5, I think the manager's pulled up absolute trees.
Well, key to their good results has been the improved form of their forwards Bryan Mbeumo and Matheus Cunha. Paul Merson thinks the pair have already had a huge impact at the club.
The players he's brought in, the three up front, 2 of them are performing. 2 are performing. They're dangers. They are, when they're hot, they are unplayable, in my opinion. They're very good players. And everybody else is playing well. Everybody's playing at 7, 7.5, 8. And they're getting that little rub of the green, which I didn't think Amorim was getting. May it continue. I like the man. I do like him because I just think he stuck with what he was doing. He believed in what he was doing, and if he was going to go out, he was going to go out his way. You know, because it takes. You've got to do something special to become the manager of Man United, in my opinion. Yeah. And he got. You know, they got to make sure they carry this run on.
No. I do want to point out though that Mark a couple of weeks ago on this very podcast had Amorim signed off and back in Portugal. Obviously, Amorim's pulled it back since then. I think at the very least, he's got something that he can point to now. For a long time at United, because the results were so bad, there was no kind of foundation, if you want to call it that, or he had done nothing in the Premier League to point to and say, I got it right there. And there was nothing for fans to say, well, if he's got it right there, then there is hope for the future. People were basing their assumptions on him, on what he'd done in Portugal. And I think actually some of the stuff that was said about Amorim was quite disrespectful, because he is a very, very good coach and achieved an awful lot in Portugal. You know, there was some of the stuff that was said about Amorim was suggesting he was some kind of dud, and that's just not the case. I think that he's found it a lot harder than he thought. I think for the first time, a couple of weeks ago in a press conference, someone said, you know, do you feel like you're taking a step forward? And he said, we have no momentum in our club, and we haven't since I came in. And I think for the first time after the Brighton game, that United do have some kind of momentum, and there will be defeats along the way, and there are going to be some absolutely horrendous results between now and the end of the season where the doubts start to bubble up again. But I think for the first time that Amorim has got something that he can point to. Those 3 wins against, you know, Sunderland, who are doing well, Liverpool at Anfield, which is massive because they've not won there for 10 years, and then Brighton, a team, the type of team that Amorim has struggled against. You know, those middle 11 teams, Amorim just couldn't buy a win against them. So to beat a good Brighton side in the way that they did, I think for the first time you can point to something, United fans can cling to something and go, yes, there is something there.
Did you, from being in the stadium, did you sense that the mood had changed a little bit?
I mean, winning at Anfield will do that for a United crowd, but yeah, the roar when the game kicked off was a little bit louder. The Amorim chant starts a lot earlier in the game. It's been missing a little bit over the last few weeks because fans are starting to doubt whether he's the right man. But that comes, the Amorim chant comes back earlier in the game. The chances are kind of, the oohs and ahs from the crowd when they're playing well are a little bit more kind of regular because they can kind of see what he's trying to do. Obviously helps when you've got players like Bryan Mbeumo, who's probably a typical Man United player in the way that he goes about it. It's very, just a handful, works really hard, gets his body in the way, horrible to defend against. United fans love to see that kind of stuff. It's something to get behind. And it does feel like the mood has changed a little bit. As I say, there are going to be some really, really poor results between now and the end of the season, because even against Brighton in a game that they won relatively comfortably, Brighton have a couple of breaks at 0-0, which could have gone a different way. They've obviously come back into the game to make it 3-2, where lots of United fans at the time are going, oh God, not again. So they are still quite vulnerable in parts of the game, and other teams aren't going to be able to take advantage of that. But I don't really want to say they've turned a corner, but I'm going to say they've turned a corner a little bit. I just think that this little run is massive for Amorim, because it feels like he's finally the United manager, and that seems a stupid thing to say because he's been there for nearly a year, but finally he's got something that he can kind of show fans, and like, this is how I want my team to play. He maybe not be able to do it consistently until he gets another summer window under his belt, but there is something there.
I bet he wishes he was facing Ange Postecoglou's Forest and not Sean Dyche's Forest at the weekend.
Well, although Postecoglou got the better run, didn't he? Twice last year.
Well, true. That is true. But it was a mess
it's
there
one of
at
those,
Forest.
Yeah, I mean, the next two games, Forest away, sorry, again is another game against those middle 11 teams that he just hasn't been able to beat. If you can beat Brighton at home, you can beat Forest away, and then Spurs away before the international break is a massive one. I actually think for the first time he's probably got a bit of breathing space, and actually if he was to get a result against Forest and then lose against Tottenham, which he could do because Spurs are playing quite well, not at home, there seems to be better away, but if they were to lose against Spurs, I don't think there would be the huge fallout that there has been in the past after defeats. I think a lot of United fans would kind of shrug and go, okay, well, we're still taking steps forward. That was just a minor setback.
Well, it probably would have been difficult for him to keep his job, because if they'd not won these 3 games and then they go and lose at Spurs, and then there's an international break where there's a lot of noise for 2 weeks, but it sort of feels like now he can get to November, he can get to that international break, and then when you come back into that, you're into Christmas and the January window. So if we're not saying that United have turned a corner, Amorim has probably bought himself the rest of the year at least.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think the last time we were talking about him on this pod, we were talking about when it could possibly get too much for the board, and I actually think the board I've always kind of maintained that they're sticking with him, so I wouldn't want to speak for them, because privately they have been very supportive, but we were sort of talking, would it be November break, would it be January? I actually think whatever happens now, he'll get the goodwill of the fans will last until at least January. It's not bulletproof, and if they were to lose sort of 5 on the bounce, obviously that would change, but I do think that this run has been so significant for Amorim that he has bought himself breathing space and bought himself time, and it's little things like you get to January and all of a sudden you've got FA Cup games. In the third round of the FA Cup, with all due respect to a League One side, you get a League One side at home and you win, and it's a comfortable win. That's the kind of thing that Amorim has not had in the first start of the first period of the season, because he hasn't had Carabao Cup games and he hasn't had European games. So you get to January, you win 2 games and you get to the FA Cup 5th round, and it makes everything feel a lot better. I think that what needs to happen now is he needs to get enough results to get him to the summer, and for the board to back him properly in the summer, and then start properly. That's what he needs. There's all this stuff about, he needs to get into the Champions League, he needs to get into Europe. That would be great. I genuinely think that the biggest thing that he can do now is to get enough results that get him to the summer without being in crisis week after week. Have enough trust from the board, from Omar Barada, from Jason Wilcox, to get him that midfielder he needs, possibly get him a left wing back, and then you start to see his team and what he's capable of. And if it's still not right by the next October break, fair enough. He'd have a long time, and that's fair enough. But I genuinely think that a couple more players, get to the summer, a couple more players, and you'll start to see what Amorim is all about the start of next season.
Okay, well, we should just mention, I think, because they deserve it, Bournemouth and Sunderland. I mean,